So I'm going to be honest, with spring break coming up, I've started to mentally check out a little bit. I feel like Chuck Fletcher could probably relate to that. Is that too far? No? It's not like he watches the show anyway, hopefully. Anyways, you're watching Sports Talk Philadelphia. Sports Talk Philadelphia. As always, I'm your host, Aidan, and I'm joined again with a full panel, starting on my left with Libby. Libby, how are you doing?
I am ready for spring break, but I'm doing good, Aidan.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that. And we also have Shane Nolan. Shane, how are you?
Doing great.
And Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing great.
So we're all doing great. We all do have spring break coming up. So sorry again if we are a little bit out of it. One team that is not out of it is the Phillies. They are very well into spring training and having some legitimate success. They're 6-1 because, again, you can have ties in spring training. When you look at how they're doing all right, although they have allowed 10 or more runs in 3 of their losses, which, again, no one really counts wins or losses in spring training, but it does make for a bit boring games. They did beat the Pirates 4-3, though, on Saturday, and they beat the Orioles 7-6. So, again, they're having some success, some losses. Mike, I want to start with you. When it comes to losses like that, do you check out of games? Like, if they're down like 10-3, is there any reason for watching at that point?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in spring training, I'm more kind of just looking at like specific players and like honing in on that more, that and not really worrying about the score, because it's spring training. You kind of just want to see who's playing well, who's not playing well. But yeah, at some point you do kind of check out. But I like spring training, but I'm ready for the real games to start.
Yeah, I feel like most players are also ready for real games, especially with the World Baseball Classic happening, which we will touch on in a bit. Libby, I want to talk to you though for a sec. When it comes to the way the Phillies are playing, there is a lot of really positive signs, especially with some of their new signings and younger players.
Yeah, they're playing great. You've got a really strong pitching core, but we've talked about it in the past few weeks, such depth. Sosa's playing really well. You've got all of your guys coming back with that World Series experience now, so it's kind of up to the Phillies now who's your lineup, and that's really what spring training is for. So, they're winning some games, losing some games, but I think it's more of a learning process for everybody to figure out when they get to Philadelphia who's going to start every day.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting to see who starts every day. And when you go through how some of these guys are playing, especially guys that were considered just depth players and are legitimately making attempts to be starters, Mundo Sosa is having a great spring training. He's batting .500, which is just ridiculous at any point in the season, spring training, regular season, whatever. He's now at 4 home runs, 7 RBIs. He's just having a great season. Alec Boehm is playing well. He's batting .350 with 3 home runs and 6 RBIs. And Derek Hall is also batting over .300 with 2 homers and 4 RBIs. So when you look at all of these guys, Shane, these aren't guys outside of Boehm. Sosa and Hall are not guys that we 100% slated to be starters, but they're making a really big statement in spring training to say, hey, I can be a regular player for the starting lineup.
You are, and that's what you want these players to do in spring training. You want them to kind of force a manager's hand to be like, hey, I belong on this team. And like with Derek Hall, they're obviously going to need him with Bryce Harper being out, because they're going to need somebody in that DH spot. And we already know Derek Hall can hit home runs. So with the way he's playing in spring training, that's well. And obviously Mundo Sosa, because I don't think he's going to be the starting second baseman, but with Bryson Stott kind of struggling a little bit in spring training, that kind of helps a little bit to have. If you have one starter struggling, at least with the way Mundo Sosa is playing in spring training, you at least have somebody to come in and play for him that is not struggling.
You make a really interesting point with the fact that Stott is struggling, because second base is one of those positions for the Phillies that is completely loaded. You have Sosa who could potentially play there. They brought in Josh Harrison recently and Stott. So Libby, it's sort of interesting. If one of these guys struggle, you have someone else stepping in. But do you think that one of these guys will step up to be the everyday second baseman?
Yeah, for Philly fans, you want to hope that Bryson Stott can get back to where he was. He was playing well last year, and he has that experience. But at the end of the day, you have to put out the guy who's playing the best. Josh Harrison had a great career with the Pirates, who they just beat. The Pirates are not that good. It's not a huge accomplishment. No hate to the Pirates, but he had a great career there. I was excited to see that the Phillies brought him back, but again, I don't know if he's that guy. You've got Sosa, who's really proving it. You know, that's what you want from guys like Shane said. It's going to be really interesting to see who can step up again when they get to Philly, because that's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, even with Sosa, there's talks of him trying to play at center field, which we've talked about before on the show. But Shane, the fact that he's batting this well makes it more intriguing to try to play him at center field in some of these spring training games.
Yeah, it does, but the only thing is he's basically an infielder, so he doesn't have much experience in center field, and they haven't really played him in center field at all during these games. But also, you kind of want Brendan Marsh out there because he's a good defender in center field. So that's kind of going to be a little bit like not troubling, but like a kind of hard decision there for Rob Thompson.
Yeah, another hard decision for Rob Thompson is trying to figure out when to pitch some of these pitchers to keep them healthy, and that's something that their youngest best prospect, Andrew Painter, has struggled with already. He pitched one start and now will be out for an undetermined amount of time with a tender elbow injury. Phillies aren't too concerned about it, but they want to be cautious considering that he is their top prospect. Pitched fairly well in his only spring training appearance, 3 hits allowed, 1 run, and he also struck out 1 in his only start. So, Mike, when it comes to Painter's injury, you've got to be somewhat concerned about it, even if the Phillies are saying that it's just to be cautious.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is at least, he is 19 years old, and, it was kind of a reach that he would contribute this year anyway, but it's a little concerning. But the Phillies saying that they're not concerned is hopefully a good sign. But we've seen, Phillies had bad luck with top, prospects or picks getting hurt. So we'll see how it plays out. But I hope that it's nothing more than just something right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the hope for everyone, is that it's nothing too concerning. Again, he is only 19, so even if it were something significant like Tommy John, which I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying if that is a possibility, thankfully he is still young enough that you can recover. And Mike, you mentioned the fact that the Phillies haven't had a lot of prospects work out for them. Tim, in my mind, he's probably the best pitching prospect since Cole Hamels, which is saying a lot, but that's really where we're at. So, Libby, even if he can't contribute right away, he's someone that the Phillies will look to probably in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think right now, cautious is the name of the game. They have to be careful with him. He is 19, but he's 19. Like, you have to be easy on him and throwing somebody into the majors, and he hasn't even been to AAA. So that's something that they need to think about. Hey, maybe we start him in AAA while he recovers a little bit, get his feet under him, and then bring him up, because it's a lot of pressure on a young kid, especially if he's already facing injury. Yeah, and when you talk about people staying healthy, that's something that Rob Thompson talked a lot about this spring training, especially because the World Baseball Classic is happening. It's already started on Tuesday. It's something to look forward to for almost every baseball fan. And the Phillies have a lot of guys participating. When you look at their starters, JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, all playing for Team USA. Then you got Ranger Suarez playing. You got Taijuan Walker. So a lot of guys to look forward to. But the fact, Shane, that there's 3 Phillies players starting for Team USA, that's a really awesome thing for the city and also for the team.
Yeah, that's a great thing to see, that the fact that 3 starting players for Team USA are from the Phillies. I mean, it just shows how good of a lineup that the Phillies have in general, and it just shows that, Team USA lineup is going to be dangerous as well, because you have Schwarber, who had 47 home runs last year. You have the best catcher in baseball in JT Realmuto, and then Turner, who is arguably the best, well, not arguably, is the best shortstop in baseball. So yeah, and the fact that the Phillies are tied for the second most team with the most players in the World Baseball Classic is also a great thing to have.
Yeah, and when you talk about the starters playing, it's obviously very cool. But there's a lot of minor leaguers for the Phillies as well that are getting experience in the World Baseball Classic. And, Mike, that's got to be just a great feeling for these guys to get a lot of playing experience, especially in a tournament like this.
Yeah, it's great. Even for the vets, the rookies, it's good that, it's good for fans that we get to have this as kind of a warm-up before the regular season starts. So it's something to look forward to, and it's, it's an opportunity for the young guys to, prove themselves on, kind of a world stage.
And just to wrap up, I want to hear from each one of you, starting with you, Mike. How do you think Team USA will do in the World Baseball Classic?
I think they'll end up winning it. It'll probably be between them or the Dominican Republic, but I think they could win it.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mike. Team USA's line is just too dangerous, and I think they're going to win it.
Yeah, Libby,
they're stacked.
Yeah.
You got to hope Team USA is going to take it.
Yeah, I will say I am also a White Sox fan, and Team Cuba has a lot of White Sox representation, so I'm also rooting for them. Got off to a slow start, but I'm excited to see all these guys playing. It's a very fun tournament to get into. Just awesome coming off of the Soccer World Cup and then the Rugby World Cup in the fall. The fact that there's this many world tournaments is just very, very fun for sports fans. We're now going to go back to the United States and focus specifically on Philadelphia basketball and the 76ers, who have gotten off on a tear recently. They did lose to the Mavericks last week, which in a very close game, and then they were able to come back to beat the Bucks. They were down by something like 20 points to come back and win that one. Beat a tough Pacers team in a close game, and then just blew out the Timberwolves recently. And we talked a lot about the struggles for the Sixers, Libby, in recent weeks, but they're finally, it's seeming like, getting hot at the right time against the right opponents.
I mean, thank goodness. I'm thrilled. It's an incredible improvement in the win column. They've always struggled against the Pacers, so it was really nice to see them win there. Maxi's starting again. I kind of think that was the spark for this team. You know, they're relying still on Maxi, Harden, and Embiid, which is fine. You have to worry about injuries a little bit, but they're finding something. They've got their spark back. Niang's had a couple decent games. McDaniels has been playing well, so you know, you have some contributors, some people who are stepping up, and if they can keep it going, this is a good time of the season to get hot.
Yeah, Libby, you mentioned Jalen McDaniels. That is a piece that really got off to a slow start since he got traded here. And now it's looking like he could be potentially that lead scorer off the bench if we move Maxi to a starter. Mike, I want to hear your opinion on that too. How do you feel like that Maxi going back to the starting rotation will help the Sixers?
Yeah, I think he, just like Libby said, I think you need to keep him there. I think, you know, he is a starter. He's one of your best players. I think just keep having him start rather than come off the bench is the best move. And yeah, I like Jalen McDaniels. I think he could be a good piece come playoff time, just kind of that, you know, 3-and-D wing player. You know, I think he's good, but it's just going to have to be consistency. I feel like every week we're talking about either they're good and then another week they're bad. You know, it's just always off and on with them. So it's just consistency, and hopefully they can keep it throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, another guy that played very, very well for the Sixers is James Harden. Absolutely balled off in the Bucks game. Had his highest scoring total ever for a game playing with the Sixers. So, Libby, this is a huge key as well for Harden to be getting hot, shooting the ball at this point.
Yeah, you know, we haven't heard a ton from him this season. He's, of course, been playing well. He's one of their key players. We've been hearing a lot about Embiid. So it's good that Embiid has somebody to help him. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to score. So who are going to be the people that do that? Harden stepping up at this point of the season is huge for them. And Maxi, you know, it's shaping up to feel a little bit different than last year if they can keep this momentum going.
Yeah, it does feel different. And, Mike, this Bucks win is a huge reason why it feels different.
Yeah, and you know they're in the tough part of their schedule, and even in their losses, they've been tough losses. But yeah, that Bucks game was a statement game definitely, and it just proves that James Harden and Embiid are, you know, they're a force to be reckoned with. And come playoff time, you know, they're going to be scary. And if they can keep that top 3 seed in the East and try to get that home court in the playoffs, that'll be huge.
You mentioned Embiid being a huge part of that. He is a huge part, and he's been playing very well in the last 4 games, averaging 37 points per game in those 4 games. Scored 42 against the Pacers, was a big reason why they were able to come away with that win, and also scored 39 points in 27 minutes against the Timberwolves. And I did do the math. I'm not a math major, so don't quote me on this for sure, but I figured that if Embiid had played 40 minutes, he would have scored close to 57 points in the game, which is just crazy when you look at it that way, Libby.
He's your franchise. That's the guy that you've been relying on, and he's been playing great, and that's what you hope for. And I'm stunned and excited that he's played so well for so long, that he's been able to stay on the court since the All-Star break and produce. You know, he's the guy that you're going to go to in the postseason too, and I hope that he can not let his emotions get the best of him and stay in it and, you know, continue to produce for this team.
Yeah, health is a big concern for him all the time. Libby, you mentioned the fact that he's been able to stay healthy since the All-Star break, which is just huge. But, Mike, you have to be concerned of the fact that we're getting late in the season. This is usually where an Embiid injury comes up. So how do you work around the fact that you want him to play these key minutes to help you get these wins to get a higher seed, but also make sure he stays healthy for the playoffs?
Yeah, that's why, you know, racking up these wins now. So, you know, you have that seed locked up so you can sit him, you know, a couple games for the playoffs, just get him fully healthy, because we haven't really had 100% Embiid going into the playoffs his whole career. I feel like there's been some type of injury, and just like Libby said, it's kind of starting to feel different, but we still have a month to go in the regular season, so hopefully that everything is still smooth sailing. But it's definitely shaping up to be something different.
Yeah, and when you look at their record, they are clearly one of the top teams in the East. They're still in the 3rd seed, but they're just behind the Celtics, only by something like a game and a half, which is not bad at all. And again, 3rd as of right now, they'd be playing the Nets, same as last week, although it looks like you could be either playing the Knicks or the Nets. So, Mike, I'm going to go back to you. Do you think that there is a chance that the Sixers can pass the Celtics with the way they're playing right now?
I think they can. It's going to be tough no matter what. I mean, the Celtics are the best team in the NBA. I think it's tough, but I think they could get the 2 seed. I don't know if the 1 seed's a possibility, but, anything can happen.
Yeah, and the Sixers, there's a lot of hope for them, a lot of good feelings, not so much about the Flyers, although they did win. They did beat the Detroit Pistons in a 3-1 win, which we'll touch on in a bit. They then followed up that win with a really bad loss, so sort of back and forth between how they are playing. Shane, we're going to go back to you. You had a very emotional outbreak on the Flyers and specifically the management of the Flyers last week. Any better feelings about them right now or not?
No,
really?
not really, because you had an opportunity to trade James Van Riemsdyk for a 4th or 5th overall pick, and Chuck Fletcher kind of basically misread the market for JVR and wanted a 2nd and 3rd round pick, which you were not going to get for him. Yes, a playoff team is going to need him because he can be a great threat. Now, I can't speak. Front net presence on a power play for a good playoff team, and the fact that he wasn't able to make that trade, you had at least 3 or 4 months to make that trade, and you want to try and make a trade for him for a 2nd or 3rd round pick coming to like the last 5 minutes of the deadline, and the fact that it also came out that apparently he had an app that told him what the market was for JVR or something like that. And if you have a GM listening to an app, I mean, it's time to let him go.
It is kind of ironic. We touched on the show about how the Flyers got rid of iPads because they wanted to get rid of technology from the coaching standpoint. But the fact that the general manager is using technology to decide where to trade, it just feels like there's no connection between the players, the coaching, and the general manager. And that just is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is, because a lot of the times you kind of hear John Tortorella in interviews. You can kind of notice that he hints that he kind of doesn't want Chuck Fletcher here anymore, and it's kind of evident with just some of the interviews that he mentions. I mean, in the beginning of the season, there was a lot of disagreement with a lot of the things that Chuck Fletcher said, like with the team when he said the team was 5 points out of a playoff spot, but they weren't playing very well. And then you have John Tortorella saying, "Oh, these players need to start picking it up. We're not playing well." He basically flat out said the team sucked. So yeah, when you have a coach and a GM not agreeing with each other, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I did also see that there's some Flyers fans planning a protest, I believe, before Saturday's game, which, again, you never want to see fans that angry about your team. You always hope that a team does well. But it's good to see there's some still passion about the Flyers, even with how badly things have gone.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of what you need. You need the fans to kind of go out and kind of have their voices heard. Because the team isn't doing anything to help make this team better. You have obviously what Chuck Fletcher did at the trade deadline. You hired the owner, Dave Scott. You had Bill Barber, who used to play for the Flyers back in the 70s, and who was kind of everything kind of runs through him with this team. You hired him to be a kind of trainer for Dave Scott to learn the game of hockey, which is unbelievable that you have to do that for an owner of a sports team, to have an owner of a sports team be trained to learn their sport. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not looking great for the Flyers, although I did mention they did beat the Red Wings in a 3-1 game, and there was some positive signs out of this game, although on the whole of the season it doesn't look great. But Carter Hart, 25 saves, only allowed 1 goal. Noah Cates had 1 goal, 3 shots on goal. Scott Laughton only had 1 goal as well, but he had 6 shots on goal, which is very impressive to see, and it's important to see some of these guys that have struggled at certain points this season step up and have games like this.
Yeah, especially Noah Cates, because he can kind of be a good piece for the future for this team. they even have a future. But he's been good for the team this season. I mean, he's been good at center. You have, like you said, Scott Lawton, who's been with this team for a long time. He's had a good season so far, and then obviously Carter Hart, who to me kept the team in the Red Wings game and kind of won that game for them.
Yeah, not only did he win the game for them just in this one, but it's felt like he is the only consistent piece on this team. And it's sort of weird because the Flyers are not going in a good direction, but it's clear that Carter Hart is the best piece on the Flyers. So obviously we have no idea what the Flyers are going to do when it comes to making trades because they did nothing at the deadline. But in the future, if the team continues to struggle like this and has no future, could you see a possibility of him being traded, as unfortunate as that would be?
Yeah, I can. Do I think it's a good idea? No, because he should be your goaltender for the future. But obviously, with the way the team is in front of him, it's not going to go well for obviously his numbers and for just the way he plays. I mean, it can mess up a goalie's mind sometimes with the way the team plays in front of you. So I mean, I hope that in the future they don't come up with a trade for Carter Hart. But I mean, we'll never know what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely something interesting you brought up is the fact that you can mentally struggle when your team's playing that badly. It looked like that was something that Hart was struggling with at certain points last season. It looks like that hasn't been as much a problem, even with how bad things have gone. And again, they're still not good. And it feels like this is a Groundhog Day episode because the Flyers at the same point that they have been for what it seems like the last year, where they're still the 7th seed. Columbus is still not any better than them, and they're no worse than Columbus. But then when you look at it, they still also have the 8th pick in the draft, which is where they've been the last 4 or 5 weeks, if not longer. So, Shane, I know it feels like we're beating a dead horse at this point, but there is no good direction for the Flyers unless they either decide to start tanking or miraculously go on a 20-game winning streak to get a playoff spot.
Yeah, with the 8th overall pick, there are some good players in the draft to go at that spot, but like we said a couple earlier, with Chuck Fletcher being the GM, I just don't trust him to have that pick because 2 years ago you had an opportunity to pick Cole Caulfield, who was probably one of the best American-born players in the draft, and he passed up on that, and he's doing great for the Canadians, and it's just I just don't know what this team will do at the draft.
Yeah, I mean, we've criticized general managers on the show in the past, but this one is just completely, there's no direction at all. At least with Howie Roseman, he was good at signing players even if he couldn't draft. So Flyers definitely need to make some changes soon or else things will get even more bleaker than they are. We're now going to go to Fast Five where Shane, we will go back to you again for talking baseball with Shane Nolan, which hopefully will be on a bit happier note than talking about the Flyers.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the World Baseball Classic started on Tuesday with the Netherlands beating Cuba 4-2, and then again they beat Panama last night 3-1. So they're off to a good start. And then earlier today, you had Japan who whooped China 8-1 with Shohei Ohtani pitching and hitting.
Yeah, Ohtani just continues to be a star either at the international level or in Major League Baseball. There's pretty much nothing this guy can't do. And it's good to see him doing it for his home country as well in the World Baseball Classic. We're now going to go to football, which we haven't really talked about since the Super Bowl. We're still kind of getting over that. But there is some news now, and it comes to the quarterback position for the Saints. Derek Carr signed a huge contract with them. So, Mike, I want to go with you. How does this change the trajectory of how the Saints are as a franchise?
Yeah, I think kind of just looking from the outside in, a lot of Saints fans aren't too happy just because they don't think that they can really compete, and Derek Carr, it might make them a playoff team, but I think a lot of Saints fans wanted one of the top QBs next season. But I think it's going to make them a good team. They'll be a fringe playoff team. They'll probably win the NFC South. But yeah, he's a good quarterback. I thought he was going to go to the Jets. I'm kind of surprised he picked the Saints, but we'll see kind of what happens with the Jets.
Yeah, and I wanted to quickly touch on that because the Jets seem like the front runner, and now they can't get him. Do you think they're going to get Aaron Rodgers or some other quarterback?
They're going to try. I think it's going to. I think they want Rodgers, but I think it's going to be up to Rodgers, and I think it's either going to be the Jets or he's going to retire. I don't see him going back to the Packers.
Yeah, there are still a lot of quarterbacks on the market at this point. Lamar Jackson still has not gone on the team. Jimmy Garoppolo will most likely not be on the 49ers next year. So the Jets have options. It's going to be interesting to see who they go with, considering that Carr seemed like the front runner for a while. We're now going to go back to Libby with golf, and although we don't have highlights for obvious reasons, the Arnold Palmer tournament did happen, and it was a very exciting tournament. So, Libby, I just want to get your sense on what the key moments of the tournament were for you.
Yeah, so this is a really fun event, and highlights here, Morikawa was 7 under today. He played a great round. Rory was a little bit disappointing today, but played really well in the last event. So he's just been kind of all over the place this season. I don't know if it's, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm hoping that he can kind of get his momentum going a little bit more and a little bit more consistently. Justin Rose is a name that we haven't heard in a really long time. He was 3 under today, so, you know, it's really up to anyone, but Arnold Palmer's a really fun event, so a good one to watch.
Yeah, no, it was definitely exciting to see how well Roy did in that one, and hopefully he can get more consistent in this tournament. We're now going to go back to Mike with another football question. Daniel Jones has signed a massive extension for 4 years, $160 million. So, Mike, what was your take on this?
I was pretty happy. I think as an Eagles fan, I think Eagles fans should be happy. I mean, you know, nothing against Daniel Jones. He's a good average quarterback, but he is not worth $40 million, and that's just the market now. And it's going to be crazy. I don't know how much Hurts he's going to get, but to think that Jones would make just a couple $1 million less is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, it's good for the Eagles, and you know, it's because the Giants, they're not going to do much with him. You know, they'll be kind of an average team at best, and you know, we'll see what happens, but I think Giants fans are not too happy with it.
Yeah, I did see when it comes to Hurts that his expected contract is somewhere between 40 to 45 million, which is huge and could cause potential problems with the Eagles. But Mike, it feels like Hurts to me is much better than Daniel Jones. I don't think that's a very controversial opinion. But if Daniel Jones is getting 40 million, you gotta wonder what Hurts will be getting for his contract.
Yeah, and it does suck because it might mess up. You know, you can't do much with the rest of the team. But that's just the QB market now. You know, if Daniel Jones is making 40 million, then Hurts is going to have to make a little more. But I think it will be around I think I saw 250 for like 5 or 6 years. So it will probably be around that ballpark, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to wrap up the show talking about the World Baseball Classic, and then something pretty crazy happened last night. So St. Peter's, yes, the St. Peter's team that went to the Elite Eight last year, is playing right now in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference tournament and was currently ranked as the 10th seed. Nothing really special about their season this year compared to last year. And yet they beat the 2nd seed Ryder in a huge upset and will be playing in the tournament's semifinal. That is the lowest seed ever in the Metro Atlantic to make it into the semifinal for their conference tournament. And although I'm not expecting them to win, it will be interesting to see what they can do after this. I mean, Ryder was expected to be a heavily competitive team. They will have to go up against Iona, against a very well-coached Rick Pitino team. And it will be interesting to see how that shakes up and what will happen in that tournament and all other future conference tournaments this weekend. That's all we have for this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check us out on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at SportsTalk LTV. We will be posting more March Madness stuff as my break starts, and therefore I will be having much more free time to focus on sports than my schoolwork, which is kind of what I do anyway. That's all we have for this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thank you for watching, and make sure to tune in 2 weeks.